Hey guys, welcome to SheKnowsArsenal. My name is Jessica. I'm your host. You can follow me on Twitter at @it'sjustino. This is the post-match podcast for Arsenal 1, Everton 2. And yeah, here we are. Yeah, not feeling much better about it. I have to be honest with you guys, like I didn't even go back and rewatch the game. I looked at some clips and some highlights, but I just couldn't really bear to watch it again because I knew I wouldn't feel any different. Like, I'm just gonna keep it 100 with you guys. I don't think I would have looked back at the game and saw any little silver linings or anything like that. I do feel like, Odegaard played well in that game, and he really did have a redemptive performance after the United match where he wasn't even bad, but he just gave away that penalty. But ultimately, that game leaves me feeling a little bit like there needs to be some bigger conversations around what we're doing at the moment with Mikel Arteta, and not necessarily a does he need to be sacked tomorrow type of thing, because I think we all know, if you've been an Arsenal fan for long enough, you know that this sacking of Mikel Arteta is nowhere near. But just, maybe taking some inventory and being a little bit more, you know, I don't know, looking at where we actually are and what we've seen, and have a to try to get a better understanding of where we are. And so that moving forward, maybe we do our I don't know. I just think we need to have a clear vision of where we are, because I mean it's hard to figure it out, because just a couple of days ago, I mean, we were right there at the top 4. We were at the top of the world. That international break felt really good. Going to, like, the Liverpool game, the Man United game, and the Everton game, 3 losses, all the way from home, 1 win against the worst team in the league, and now we sit 7th. So when you look at it from a points perspective, it's not like all is lost. But I just kind of tweeted a couple of minutes ago that um, if we were sitting 7th and the performances against, you know, um, Liverpool away, Man United, and Everton were good performances where we played really, really hard and the football was good, but the results just didn't go our way. That's something that you can kind of take. It's like, because not every single result is going to go your way. Even if you play really, really well, sometimes it just doesn't go your way. But it wasn't that. It really was, the horseshoe of death had come back. The performances for me just didn't look like a team that was really fighting for anything. We looked scared, frightened, devoid of ideas, scared of our own shadow, scared of Everton, and we were scared of Man United as well. We looked like we were shitting our pants against Liverpool. And so when you have that combination of a bad performance, bad football, you know, um, decisions that you can't really understand or get behind, uh, mixed with bad results, then it becomes like, oh, we're 7th. And it feels like Groundhog's Day again, like it was last season pre Boxing Day, where it's a slippery slope to mid table. And we're very much on the doorstep of it. And so I just feel like when you have the performances and the football to back it up, you can take these results a little bit more, but we don't really have that. And that's where the conversations around where we are really stemming from, not really, the points. I get that we're 4 points behind top 4, but proximity can be very deceiving. There's still a lot of, well, we're not that far off where we want to be. And that's true. But do the performances and the football that we're playing make you feel like we're closer to where we want to be? We all know that performances and repeatability, and if your underlying metrics are saying that you're doing really well, but maybe the results aren't adding up, then you can kind of say, okay, well, we're on the right path. But we're kind of the opposite, where our results were looking really good, but the underlying metrics were looking a little like, okay, something's not right. Now the results are catching up to our underlying metrics. So I don't think our proximity to top 4 right now doesn't really matter, because the performances just aren't lining up. And if we're really honest with ourselves, we're not only putting in performance that are significantly lower than the teams that are trying to get into the top 4, but you can argue that even the teams that are trying to get into the top 6, into the European places, we're not really, keeping up with them. And that's within these last 4 matches. That's really what we're looking at here. So that's why I've named the episode Proximity Can Be Deceiving, because I think when you look at it, you can always kind of say, there's a reason why we're 1 point below Man United, but Manchester United fans are so much more excited than we are. It's even when they were below us, they were more excited. It's because they felt like they were going in the right direction. I think there's an undercurrent of insecurity within the fan base because we kind of know that just because we're close to it doesn't necessarily mean that we're actually close to it, if that makes sense. Let's see what you guys are saying. Banky saying, "Hey Jess, hey, how are you?" CC says, "You look nice. Love your makeup. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it." Um, Tony says, "Hey Jess, hey to you as well." Henrik says, I would love to see Arsenal attack more in transition by pressing the other team. We have lots of players who could benefit from that form of play, but maybe it's far from the reality at the moment." Yeah. I mean, I think we'd all like to see a different way of play, I think if we're real, Um, Tony says, Party's not a Prem player. He finds it too hard. He definitely did not have a good game. Yo-Yo says, Arteta isn't going anywhere, so he has no choice but to find solutions. Um, yeah, I mean, he does have to change something. Jose Flores says, Jess, do you think there's any hope for Arteta if he's able to get the mid and attack he wants in January? Or is it at the point that you don't even think that he'll be able to make it to January, compete for fifth? So, I mean, here's the thing is that I think if I go back in time to the last time I felt like our attack was ticking, it was during the FA Cup run. And that was a long time ago. Like in football terms, just a year ago is a long time. So we won the FA Cup, and a lot of people said that the way that we're playing wasn't sustainable. But we were playing in a 3-4-3. We were really hard to break down, playing kind of conservatively, so kind of similar to the way that we play now. But that style of play really suited Aubameyang and Nicola Pepe in particular. And because our fullbacks weren't good enough to really be true fullbacks, having them play as wingbacks, I think helped us in attack, but also helped us plug the holes with a leaky defense and a not so great midfield. So it worked for us. And that was the last time that I've seen Aubameyang really look like Aubameyang, you know what I mean? Really on form. You know how he is. He's the kind of guy that needs to be the guy. That's the last time I really seen him like that. Lacazette was playing pretty well at that point. Nicola Pepe was really adding things. Like if we remember how he was in the FA Cup final, we really haven't seen that Nicola Pepe, have we? And so going into last season, we switched that all up, went to a back four, started playing some kind of combat, like some sort of 4-2-3-1 system, and everything just kind of fell apart from there. It was really the last time that I felt like Arteta was playing to the strengths of the attacking players that we had right now. And so I think he took a huge, huge, huge risk doing that, because not only we're talking about arguably the highest paid players and the most expensive players on the team are like he's no longer playing to their strengths, and they're also senior players with a lot of influence. And I think that that's really hurt him, and it's a huge risk. If you want to leave Aubameyang out in the cold and kind of play in a way that doesn't really suit him, you have to make sure that you're winning games. And it hasn't really worked out that way. And that's not to say that Aubameyang and Pepe and Lacazette don't have their own, they don't have any part in this, but ultimately when you don't play to your attacking players' strengths and you kind of act like, well, these are not the players that I really want, so I'm just going to kind of do what I want to do, or I'm hell bent on playing in a certain way, you better hope that it works out. You better hope that it works out. And I think at different points of the season, last season, plus like now coming into this Christmas period now, you're seeing that the effects of not playing to those players' strengths is really hurting us in terms of our attack, and a lot of it is coming from playing in a way that doesn't suit the midfield players and the attack. So that's what I kind of think about that. So when you ask me like, do I think that if there's any sort of way for Arteta to come back, in my mind there is a way to come back from it. It's get off your high horse and start playing in a way that suits our attacking players and get them involved. It's not just that it's not that just Aubameyang is our go-to striker. He's also our captain, and his personality is that of somebody who really, really wants to be number one. He wants to be the main guy, the superstar. You cannot have your superstar striker not being played to his strengths. It just doesn't make sense. So now it's pretty much a waiting game where we have senior players and the ones that are really like the ones in attack, just they're not really we're not getting anything out of them. I think ESR and Odegaard have more goals than Lacazette. And I think ESR is tied on goals with Aubameyang in the league. So we're talking about players that are out of form, but I also feel like they're not being like the way that we play doesn't really suit them. And so Arteta's waiting until the transfer window to get the perfect players into his system so he can stop using these guys that he doesn't want. But I guess my question is like, he's gotten the defense that he wants. The midfield is practically his, but we still see a lot of issues with those two departments, despite the fact that the attack is not ticking. That's my issue is that do I believe that once he gets his striker and his midfielder, things will be better. I hope so, but I believe any new manager that would come into this group would need those players, but he's not getting the most out of the defenders that he has. He's not getting the most out of the midfield that he has, and those are the he's already gotten the players that he really wants. He had a preseason, and we're not really see. I mean, we've given up 10 goals in the last 4 games. That's a lot for a defense that's supposed to be a lot better. It's just I wanna say that I believe that if he gets a new striker and a midfielder, all will be, changed, but I haven't seen much with this group that makes me think that he's gonna be able to get much out of anything, That's kinda how I feel at the moment. It could just be hangover from this weekend's game, but that's kinda what I feel like right now. Um Avik says they shouldn't extend his contract if the team can't build sustained attacks and create double digit chances. Problems with attacking and creativity are usually the hallmark of mid table sides. Yeah, I hear that. Ahmed says, I've accepted that we're going to finish no higher than seventh this season. I mean, our underlying metrics, everything that you look at in terms of how many goals we score, how many goals we concede, the chances that we create, the way that we play, the mentality of this team reeks of mid-table. So we've played a couple of more difficult fixtures, some fixtures away from home that we should have been able to at least have a foothold in. We let the Liverpool game go. The United game was horrible and the Everton game was horrible. And now we are just a couple of points above mid-table and we feel more like a mid-table team than somebody really fighting for fourth. And I don't think you're wrong but saying that unless something changes. Banky Atkins says Arteta has shown me enough to conclude that he lacks the ability to implement or sustain an effective attacking style of play, especially with these players. I'm losing hope in him really fast. I mean, yeah, it's just one of those where it's kind of like you come straight in. You've changed so many things, but we're talking about the same issues. Not being able to sustain attack, possession looking suspect, really conservative way of playing. And it's just so funny because we don't attack really, and we don't take risks, but we still give up a lot of goals. And I just feel like that's coaching, especially when these are your players. These are your guys. Like either you've re-signed them on contracts or you've bought them. So either way, it's really on Arteta at this point, and I wanna believe that they just need to gel and all of that. But there are other teams out there that have gotten new managers in and new players in that are not suffering the way that we are. So it's interesting, you know? It's not interesting, it's disheartening, but it's, you know. Tony says 18th and big chances created. I mean, yeah. I mean, do we really believe that if we can't get the ball to our striker, and if we can't get the ball to our striker, then why would a new striker really make a difference? You know, it's more about the system and the way that we play. And in this particular game, we went back to that left side bias thing where it's like we don't play on the right hand side at all. The right hand side is really isolated, and it's Xhaka to Tierney, try to cross, Xhaka to Tierney, try to cross, Xhaka to Tierney, try to cross. And we did get one goal from it, but it was our first chance, our first shot on goal. And that just reeks of just bad coaching to me, because if that's what we were doing last season and 12 months later we're doing it still, and it was unsuccessful last season and we're still doing it. And so if we're still seeing the same things, you can't say that it's the players. Either you're telling them to do something different, you're telling them to do something different and they're not doing it, but you're still playing them and still, giving them new contracts, or this is exactly what you're telling them to do and it's unsuccessful. Either way, it's a coaching issue, but he seems very hell bent on playing this way, and he hasn't really showed any impetus to try to change it or play a more progressive attacking style. And my inkling is that he does not know how to, because he's never coached before. Like, it's not out of the realm of possibility that he just doesn't know what he's doing because he's never done it before. So, yeah. Cece says, "Do you think part of the reason why people are feeling more frustrated is because of the new beginnings at Man United, Spurs, Villa, and it seems the same old Arsenal wants something new?" Cece, I do think that there's something in that. I think the confidence was shaken against Liverpool. I think there was a little bit of that, but it could be covered up because it's just Liverpool and we were still near the top four. Then Manchester United got Ranić. We already know that Conte is at Spurs. They started winning games. Man United started winning games. We lost to Manchester United, and then we're going on this bad run of form. So I do think some of the coaching changes have made Arsenal fans kind of look around and say, why are we sticking with this new manager thing if none of our contemporaries are? Because last season, it was all good and well and fine because Chelsea had Lampard and Manchester United had Ole. They both upgraded to world class, or at least Ranić is at least a world class like operator. He may not be a world class manager, but he knows what he's doing, and he has disciples to really back that up. And then you have Tuchel, who's like a really, really good manager. So when you look at it and we're still kind of sticking with Arteta, it does make you look around and say, okay, if everybody else is kind of given up on these little like legends of the club, good feeling managers, young up and coming manager project things, then why are we sticking with it? I do think you have a point there that people are starting to look around and be like, what are we doing? And I do think you do need to look and see what's working, and don't try to recreate the wheel. If you're going to try to do something that's out of the realm, like out of something that people would never think that a club of our size would do, it has to work. And at the moment it doesn't look like it is, so I can't lie and say that when Ranić came into Man United, that I didn't instantly feel a little bit of why is Arteta still here? We need to do something else. And it just so happened that the results kind of came at that same time, so it is compounding things a little bit, especially because we're playing such bad football. Um, and also, I don't know if you guys, because I know a lot of Arsenal fans just watch Arsenal, but I try to watch every game that comes on so I can see what other people are doing. And I have to be honest, there was instant improvement from Ranić, against Crystal Palace. Not so instant with Conte with Spurs, but there has been some improvement. There's been instant improvement from Steven Gerrard and instant improvement from Patrick Vieira. So, we're 2 years in, he's had a preseason, he spent over 250 million over 2 transfer windows. There's no Ozil, Guendouzi, trouble in the locker room, none of that going on. There's fans back in the stands. You know, these are his players, and we're still kind of talking about the same things. And it can't just be he needs his striker and everything will fall into line. I think we're all kind of knowing that that's not it. Jose Flores says, the annoying thing is I do believe that we have a good squad. We bought good players this past summer, and a better manager would have us competing for Champions League spots for sure. I mean, I tend to agree that I feel, first of all, I think we make too big of a deal about sacking managers. I know that we don't want to become Chelsea, but it's not like sacking managers has ever really hurt them that much. I think we don't want to become that revolving door of managers, but I think the idea that everything is going to fall apart if Arteta leaves doesn't really make sense to me, because it's not like any of these players are going to leave. They're still young. They have, it doesn't seem like they've been coached in Arteta's philosophy, so it's not like I believe that no other manager will be able to work with them. And I don't like projects that are attached to managers anyway. I believe that whatever we're doing needs to be sustainable with or without Mikel Arteta, so that if he does hit a really bad run of form, um, and we're far off of, European qualification, we should be able to bring in somebody else that fits the philosophy that the club has made up, and will stick to, and we can move away from Mikel Arteta. I do believe that another manager can get just as, like, I think I think in 2 weeks, a new manager would have us in a style of play that we could see right in front of our eyes. And I also think a new manager takes Pepe and Aubameyang, you know, and plays to their strengths. Martinelli, our strongest attackers, because as much I love Emil Smith Rowe and I love Bukayo Saka, but they're not our most dangerous. They add something in terms of our facilitating play, but I think that's more because of the way Arteta plays than them necessarily being our most dangerous attackers. And that's no shade to them whatsoever. Our most dangerous attackers, if you're just talking about pure goal scoring ability, is Aubameyang, Martinelli, and Pepe. And I think we're not using any of them to their best, strengths. So it's no surprise that we're not scoring goals. I think another manager dust those three guys off and starts getting them ticking with a combination of ESR and Saka. But yeah, I mean, I think we'd be in and around the mix. I think we'd at least play better football. You know, let's see. Yo-Yo says it's funny how underlying statistics were used to defend the manager for most of his tenure, and now it's being dismissed when used to criticize him. Well, that's the thing is, and I don't know why this is, but there seems to be a real grip or reluctancy to criticize Arteta, or even have an honest conversation about the fact that he's not really doing a great job at the moment. And my whole thing is, when things are going good and I see improvement, I'm going to say that. But then when I also think we're playing horribly and the performances are not good enough and the football is dire, I'm going to say that as well. And in that good run, the underlying metrics were not great, but you could also look at some of those performances and say, well, the defense was doing their job. They were really trying hard, and we just need to be able to figure out a way to get that attack going. But not only is the attack still not ticking 4 or 5 games later, but now the defense is falling apart. And that's an issue. Very similar to what happened last season. I think we're in a better place in terms of the table than we were last season, but our metrics, our statistics are pretty much the same, if not worse, which basically just tells you that the rest of the league has been more shit and the better teams have been more dominant than they were the season prior. That's pretty much all it tells you, that we haven't really changed that much. And it's okay to be honest about that, but it just then you have to have a conversation about the manager. And it's not even like Arteta was a legend of the club, so I don't really know why people are protecting him. Like, do you know what I mean? Like, I don't really get why we can't criticize him. I mean, we were quick to go in on Emery, and I thought he was not great. So if Arteta's not doing a good job and he's been backed, then there's no reason not to say anything. Um, Matt G says, "You're right, Jess. He's either telling them to do this or he's not, and they're not listening to him." Exactly. And that's that's it's weird. You know what I mean? It's just weird because if if they're not listening to you, like, then why do you keep playing them and keep doing it? Like, it just honestly, it's all a coaching issue. Yes, some of the players are not in good form and they're doing this and doing that, but ultimately, when almost the entire team is out of form, that's the manager. It's the coaching. They're low on confidence. How can a team that was in good form before the international break be just completely devoid of any confidence just after the Liverpool game? I mean, that's the other part about it, is that if we were actually in good form and the team was confident in what we were doing, one loss against Liverpool, a win and then another loss would not have shaken our confidence that much. And I think because there's no foundation, the foundation is creaky. It's very based on results. It's not based on performance. Performance breeds results over a period of time. Results, if they don't have a good foundation, the crack will start to show. And we have a run of games and then the cracks form again. At the back end of last season, we were playing decent, and then in the Europa League we saw those cracks come back, and ultimately, like, we got to that semifinal and that the foundation just completely capitulated. So it's a weird one, but we'll see. We'll see. Tony says stats question is simple. Emery's stats were bad. Arteta improved, but this year Arteta isn't better than last year's Arteta. Yeah, no, I hear what you're saying. I do think that when you look at Emery's statistics, though, we created significantly more chances. I want to say almost 15 more chances um, in the season that Emery had, and then we actually gave up less goals under Emery as well. So if you really look deep into those statistics, even though we feel better about what we're looking at, ultimately the bottom line is that we had more points under Emery, we had more goals under Emery, and we actually gave up less goals under Emery. And some part of it makes me think as well that it might be because we attacked more. And I think the fact that Arteta's team do not attack at all, that we're constantly kind of defending, because we actually don't even have as much possession as we used to. It's putting a lot of pressure on our defense. So even though we have better players back there, like, there's a reason why they say the best defense is offense. And we never really use that to our advantage. We're kind of constantly defending and then trying to figure out what we're going to do. So even though we feel better about what we're looking at under Arteta, we may like the players more. It may feel like a better place to be. When you look at Emery's statistics, we scored more goals and we didn't give up as many. Arteta's teams are giving up a lot of goals. And I also think that a lot of those goals are coming against the big teams. Just letting 5 or 6 go past you, without even laying a glove on anybody. It's mad. So, and I'm not saying that Emery was good, but what I am saying is that Arteta's not good either. Um, let's see. Jordan Davis says the manager is the one who has to uplift the team. These players are very young and they need characters and leaders, experienced players in the team. Um, So here's the thing, is that it's just interesting because when Arteta first came in, a lot of the emphasis was on how bad the players were and how bad their mentalities and attitudes were. And Arteta made a big deal about getting rid of those players, and moving them on. And in particular, we're talking about like Mustafi, Ozil, and Guendouzi. He made a big deal about getting rid of those players and their attitudes, and they just weren't a part of the project and all that kind of stuff. Their mentality wasn't good. This whole team's mentality wasn't good. Over Arteta's tenure, over the last 18 months, the entire team has pretty much changed, barring Aubameyang, Lacazette, Pepe, and Xhaka. Xhaka and Aubameyang are the players that he gave them new contracts. And so for me, it's kind of like if the players that had the bad mentality are gone, and now the new players that you have the same mentality as the last players, but you brought them in, then the mentality is coming from you. That's what it looks like. And what I'm talking about with the mentality, I'm talking about the giving up late goals, not being able to sustain a lead, playing on the back foot, giving up easy goals, not competing in big matches. That stems from the manager. So when the whole team changes, but we're talking about the same things, it's coming from you, you know? That's just how it is. But I think I don't listen to Gary Neville that much. I don't think he's amazing, but not when he's talking about Man United because he can't be unbiased, but he did say, like, I think on like Sky Sports the other day, I forget, I don't know what he's on, but he said that it's not the young players' faults. They're good young players that have just come into the team and they're very talented, but they don't have the direction and the experience next to them when things get tough in hard away games, like Everton away. Because Goodison Park is not an easy place to go, Liverpool away, Old Trafford. Like they just don't have the direction or the experienced players around them to put their arm around them. And it's the senior players that we have don't really have that mentality about them. Aubameyang, Thomas Partey, Lacazette, Pepe, they've never been leaders, so asking them to do it now when they're out of form is gonna be really difficult. And he also said that Arteta doesn't have it. He doesn't have the ability to lead this young team, and I think that's where it becomes difficult to understand what this project really is, because if you ask me to choose, would I rather have, you know, older players and a young coach or younger players and a more experienced coach? I'm going to go with the players because I believe these players are closer to where we want to be than Arteta is to what, like, Arteta is further away from being the manager that we need him to be than these players are into being the players that we need them to be. I think with a better coach, we get more, but it also has to do with the experienced players. But again, Arteta decided to not play to the strengths of the senior players that we have. So it's hard to get buy-in from players who are not leaders already, but you've also decided to basically push them to the exterior of the team and you're still asking them to play for you. That is a very difficult ask from players that don't give a shit about Arsenal Football Club. And that's no shade to Aubameyang, no shade to Pepe or Lacazette, but they're not exactly Jordan Henderson. They're not players that have been at the club for 10 years or so. They bleed it. When you have older players that care about the club, you can ask them to take a more team oriented role that doesn't have to do with just them. When you're talking to Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang, the only way you get buy-in from him is if everything revolves around him. And he did the exact opposite. He pushed him basically out of the team. So what does he expect? But that's all about a lack of leadership and a lack of experience, in my opinion, from Mikel Arteta. And it's weird, you know. That's just it. So I did want to read out a couple of tweets to ask you guys what you thought about them. Um, I see a super chat just came in from Abdi. Abdi says, "How dare we sit back and waste time in the 60th minute like relegation team faking injuries? It's the 90th minute." I mean, that was just a part of the game that was just like so infuriating because it was like we had decided, and that's why I think that there is some sort of element of the team being told to not attack, to hold on to the lead, sit back when we're winning, because who starts faking injuries at the 60th minute? Who does that? I feel like that has to be coached. It just has to be. So let me see. I had a couple of tweets that I wanted to ask you guys about. So where is it? So this comes from Ben Browning, um, who's a pretty cool guy that works for one-on-one goals, but he pulled out an excerpt from something that James McNicholas from the Athletic slash Arse blog said. And essentially he said Arteta is keen on specificity, on having players who fit his meticulous criteria between transfer windows. However, he needs to work with what he's got and he needs to do better. That comes from James McNicholas. And then Adam Vogue, who's a really good follow on Twitter, said, day afterthought, when you're short on talent, you should be long on preparation and organization. Even at times when things are going well, they don't look well drilled. A coach needs to be able to organize a squad and play to its strengths. That's missing for me. So I think a lot of us are kind of on that same page where the coaching is coming into question. Is he getting the most out of the players that he has right now? And because we know Arteta's not going anywhere, our only hope is that he does some self like look at himself and looks in the mirror and says like I'm not doing what I need to be doing, because if he goes into that locker room and starts blaming Aubameyang for missing that sitter or blaming Nketiah for missing that sitter, then he's missed the point. Because it shouldn't have come down to an Aubameyang chance and a Nketiah chance to save his ass. We were playing like shit from minute 1, and he has to be honest that it came from him. Pramod says, I think Arteta is using Arsenal to get good job experience for his next job. We don't mean anything to him. I mean, I don't know what we mean to him or what we do or what we don't. I just feel like we're getting to a really, we're getting the only thing that's really saving him is that there are still some Arsenal fans who feel, and maybe even the club feels this way, that he still doesn't have his team. But a good manager would be able to get something out of these players. I mean, the club has spent almost 200 million, if not more, on Lacazette, Aubameyang, and Pepe, and he's not getting anything out of the 3 of them. Nothing. And the club is just standing by and saying that's okay, not to get anything out of those 3. Like, that's just to me, that just don't make no sense. Like, that just don't make no sense. Tony says there are only a few teams that can demand perfect specificity: Barcelona, Real, City, Bayern. That's about it. And that's kind of what it is to me. It's like we are we're building something with young players, but we're not a team that can afford to just throw players to the side because they don't fit your meticulous standards. Aubameyang is not shit. Pepe is not unusable, and Lacazette is not the worst thing in the world, but he's not using them. Like, I just feel like he decided that's not what I want, and I'm just gonna start doing what I wanna do even though I don't have the right players. And I wanna ask you guys if you think that's because he feels like he's safe. Only a manager that doesn't feel like he's under any sort of pressure or any doesn't have any sort of requirements would go into a team and basically play a way that doesn't suit any of your biggest players or your most expensive players or any of your best attackers. So I think that speaks to how safe he is in his job, because there's absolutely no way that any manager comes in and just disregards Aubameyang, Pepe, and Lacazette like that. No way. Even Martinelli, because if he really wanted to get the most out of those players, we'd be playing like we did against in the FA Cup. And a lot of teams are playing 3-4-3s now, so it's not necessarily like that system that you only play when you just need to get over the hump. A lot of teams are playing with 3 at the back and just keeping that system if it works. Mohammed says, to me, coach needs to be flexible with his approach. Why can't we play a 3-4-3? He has not tried to play a 3-4-3 this season at all, not even against the big teams. And I found that to be a little bit weird. Maybe he did against Man City. Some people were telling me that he did, but it just feels like he's inflexible, very hell bent on doing something specific, even if it's not working. And I don't necessarily feel like when he gets his striker, things are just going to fall into place. Lugo says, no coach gets all new team, even the top ones. Why are we always insisting he first needs to complete new team? He is wasting talent at the same time. I mean, that's pretty much what we're saying, you know? Um, Cannon says Pepe is not unusable. Yeah, I mean, he wasn't bad until like we switched from like the way that we played honestly in that FA Cup run is the way you have to play with Nicola Pepe. But he is our record signing, and Arteta has rarely played to his strengths. He kind of just, was like, okay, this is the way I want to play. And so if you don't fit it, F you, you know, it is weird. It's weird. It's weird. I think he should be trying to get more. Um, and there was, let me see if I can find it. Um, Make sure you guys are liking the video and subscribing to the channel. This is just kind of like a free form because we can talk about the game, but I feel like there are bigger conversations happening around the game because we played so poorly that you can't really pick much out of it. But it has ignited a fire in this fan base. And so that's kind of what we're talking about. But if you want to talk about something else, please feel free to drop a question into the chat box. Um, oh, where did it go? I don't know. If I can find it now. There was a I don't know if I can find it. Sorry, you guys. I'm trying to find something that I saw earlier that I was going to read to you guys. I think I kind of remember what it was. So essentially, it was somebody had kind of retweeted what the requirements were for Arteta when he first came in. When he first came in after Emery, the requirement was that, and I say requirement very loosely, that he needed to compete in the Europa League, finish in a respectable position. I don't really know what that means, and instill a culture. His second year, which was last year, he was supposed to get into top four. He was supposed to try to win the Europa League if we were in it, which we were not. Oh no, we were, but I think he got kicked out in the semifinal, and try to get a domestic cup. So essentially, like if the requirements last season were for him to get into the top four, try to win the Europa League, and try to win a domestic cup, attack it aggressively is what it said, then why is he still here? Like, he didn't get anywhere near any of those things, and I do think that maybe there's, a little bit of, "Oh, well, it was COVID. Oh, well, the senior player that we brought in Willian hadn't worked out." But if the goal was to get into the top 4 and you came in 8th, that's really off the mark, and this is where it gets a little bit like, "Oof," because if your requirement for him was to make it into the top 4 last season and compete to try to win the Europa League, like, actually try to win it, he really missed the mark, and I feel like they're letting him off easy, but I think that goes back to that is what they're saying to the fans, is that there's these requirements for him, but in reality, there's not, and this is a very long-term vision that doesn't really require Arteta to meet very many benchmarks, and that's scary. Tony says, question for Jess in the chat. Should we panic loan Ramsey? Leader gives a shit about Arsenal CM depth. The issue is that he's made of glass. And I'm afraid that coming back to the Premier League from Serie A and having to play in such a physical and unforgiving league, he may not be able to play in it anymore. I know that he used to, but it's different now. So that would be my apprehension about Ramsey. Um, yeah, that's a little bit of probably what my apprehension around him would be. He does kind of play a midfield role that we really lack, which is somebody that can score goals from midfield. And he does give a shit about Arsenal. We know he does, but um, I'm sure he would come back, even on a loan. But I'm not sure if I would trust that he would stay fit. That's my only thing. The last thing we need is for him to get injured right away. And then what do we do from there? Pap says, what manager is out there right now for Arsenal, and what do you think about Eden Terzic? Um, so essentially, for me, like when it comes to the managers, I know it's always about like who's available. But for Arsenal Football Club, we're still big enough to buy somebody out of their contract. And if they're not available, we need to make them available. I really push back on this whole like nobody would come to Arsenal, you know, um, we're a dead club. We're only really a dead club because we act like one. If we started acting like a big club, people would start to respect us. So, for me, I think that oh, you're talking about the old Dortmund coach, interim. So, for me, when it comes to like the managers, it's not really about for me who's available. It's who fits what we're trying to do. We have a lot of young players, but it also needs to be somebody that is if Aubameyang and Thomas Partey are going to be important parts of our team moving forward, which I think they will be, even if we bring in a new striker, I don't think Aubameyang's going to go anywhere. And Thomas Partey is still a big part of our team, even though he's playing like ass like right now. Um, it needs to be somebody who's worked with young players before and has been successful with them, but also has enough clout and enough um, gets enough respect where some senior players would rate them. It can't just be somebody that young players like, it has to be senior players as well. Somebody that's worked at a big club before, ideally. And I think for this fan base, what's probably important is that for me, I just want to win things. Like I don't really care really what it looks like. If we're winning, I don't care. But I think the Arsenal fan base wanted to see nice football. I think that's something that the fan base is really, into. It's not really I do love it, but at the same time I just want to win. But if it's somebody that could bring in a style of football that feels native to Arsenal, which let's be real, Arteta ball is not that, then I think that would really work. And then somebody that just feels like somebody that could be there for more than 18 months. Um, I like the idea of Ten Hag, very much. I do fear he'll end up at Man United. I feel like, you know, that is who Ralph Rangnick will go for. I think they'll skip out on Poch. I don't think they really want him that much, but I feel like Ten Hag would be a good 'cause he's not so big where it's like, it's not like a Conte type or a Jose Mourinho type. It's about me only. He's a club guy, who he's been kind of at Ajax for a while. He hasn't been at another really, really big club, but Ajax is big enough in its own right. And what does Ajax do better than anybody is churn out really good young players. And you know, I feel he overperforms in the Champions League for what they actually have in terms of talent. And but he's old enough where people would respect him. Like he's not almost the same age as the players. And they play a really attractive style football. So Ten Hag is somebody that I would really look at. Gaultier, that I think now is at Nice, is somebody that I would look at as well because he was the old Lille coach. He won the Ligue 1 with Lille, and he's somebody I would look at as well. Um, I know people are thinking about Luis Enrique, and I don't know enough about him to really speak on him. Um, and those are the 2 managers that I would be looking at. Potter, he's never really managed a big club before. I think he would have us playing nice football, but then can you get us playing nice football and winning games at a club that's under pressure? Um, and it's not Brighton. I'm not sure. So even though I like what he does, I'm not sure that he fits the profile in terms of the clout aspect of things. So for me, it would be Ten Hag, bring Overmars with you. Overmars has spoken many times about wanting to come back to Arsenal and fix this mess. And if not that, maybe Gaultier. Those are the two managers that I would look at. Um, but see, it's like, even though we're talking about managers now, it's difficult because we know we're nowhere near getting a new manager. Um, Arteta would have to be like in 15th. Like, I think and they would still stall on it. Jose Flores says, you would need to take back staff at Ajax with Ten Hag to have him work. It won't work without them. I mean, when Arteta goes, I want everybody that's worked with him out. I think the only person you'd probably want to keep around is the set piece coach. I think whatever manager comes in, if they're the right guy, you go with all his guys and you clean house, because I personally have not been impressed by Arteta's staff. I find it strange that everybody that he's hired up until this point have been younger than him. I think that's to keep people from challenging him. And I worry about somebody who doesn't want true input from people that know more than him. He's a little bit of that, like, trying to get that grasp on the authority in the place, and that worries me. So anybody who Arteta has hired, I would want them to clean house, because I don't think they've done anything of note that I could say, yeah, that looks like something that we should keep. And I would want Ten Hag to come in with all his staff. Yo-Yo says, didn't Ten Hag work under Pep? Isn't he who people claimed Arteta was? But he actually has experience and he's actually a good manager. That's the difference. CJ, if this club was serious, we'd already be in talks with Ten Hag and Overmars. But here's the thing: is I think they're nowhere near sacking Arteta. So it's hard to have these conversations now because we know so many things would have to go wrong. You know, Yo-Yo says, Nketiah, a question, Nketiah was one of the few positives against Everton despite the contract rumors with AFCON arriving soon and other forwards struggling. Should he be starting this weekend? What I would prefer is for Arteta to find a way to get the most out of Aubameyang. That's what I would prefer. He's still on contract with us. He's your guy. He's the guy that you signed. Um, I would prefer that than starting Nketiah. I know that we're all upset with Aubameyang. He's not playing well, but I do think that it's not all on him. I think when you don't play to his strengths, what do you expect? And because I would love for Arteta to make a move, but I know he won't, because Arteta's very arrogant in that way, and he never wants to admit that he's done something wrong. So I don't see him going back to a more counterattacking style, a more direct style, a 3-4-3 type of style, because it would almost be like an admittance of wrong. And he also has enough backing from the Cronkies where he doesn't feel like he needs to show them anything results wise, in order to show that he's moving in the right direction. So I prefer him put Aubameyang first because he's the best striker that we have at the club. And Nketiah was fine, but I would actually prefer, if anybody was going to start through the middle, I would prefer it to be Martinelli. He has a contract. He's our star. He's the boy that is committed to the club. And Nketiah may have made a good little, cameo appearance, but I think we need to prioritize the people that are going to be here. And not only that, some of the people that are going to be here are actually better than Eddie Nketiah. So I wouldn't want to see him start against Southampton. I want to see Arteta prioritize Aubameyang and play in a way that will get him scoring, because he's the closest thing we have to a world-class striker. Tony says, it's not that I'm Arteta out, but I'm 2 losses or a draw and a loss away from Arteta out. I'm also 2 wins from Arteta in. Fair enough. Adam said on Twitter that he's an Arteta doubter. And I feel like that's where a lot of people have kind of slid over the last couple of games, because it's not, again, where we are in proximity to the top 4/top 6 is not like, oh my gosh, like if you just looked at the table, you wouldn't think that we're doing so bad. But you cannot tell me that those performances And the type of football that we're playing is not alarming right now, especially 18 months in to a project, 200 and something million spent, a preseason being had, and we're in December. So I hear what you're saying. And I mean, he could turn around and win 2 games on the bounce because I mean, are we playing against West Ham soon? I don't know if he wins that, but we could win against Southampton and people would turn back around, or move back into Arteta in. But I'm looking really, really closely at those, at the performance level and the type of football that we're playing, because that's really what needs to change. That's what needs to change at this point. Nashville says, just got here. I absolutely require a manager who plays a good brand of football. Most Arsenal fans do, which is fair. Um, Balogun over Eddie, I mean, that's another discussion as well. It's like, well, if Eddie's going to be playing, can't Balogun take those minutes? Like, you know, let's see. Yo-Yo says, people forget that Abba was scoring goals off the bench under Unai. I mean, there just has to be I know it's not gonna happen because I know Arteta well enough at the moment that he's never gonna concede that he's made a mistake, and he's not gonna go that far. He would never go back to playing a 3-4-3, plugging the holes and playing counterattacking football with Aubameyang, Martinelli, and Pepe up front. He's never gonna do it. So so he's just gonna keep going with this because there's no reason for him to change because the club are gonna back him, they're gonna give him more money to spend, and everything is gonna apparently click together once he gets his striker and his midfielder. Now, what'll be interesting is if he does get those players and it doesn't click, then I think they might sack him. But that'll be next season. And by then, we will be 3.5 years into this project. It's a long time. And he'll be coming up to the end of his contract as well. They better not renew him. Um, let's see. Ivy says, "Nah, not me. Arteta needs to go, whether he wins Southampton or not. He's not the answer." Name Block says, Nketiah plays because they want to increase his value. When AMN spoke up, he got a couple of games. Now he's back to the bench. KSC only cares about transfer value. Yeah, no, I hear you. So basically, well, what we kind of went through was proximity can be deceiving. We may be near the top 4, but we're playing more like a mid-table team. Arteta, I know he won't do it because again, he has no reason to, and he will not admit that he made a mistake. But Arteta has if he wants to be successful this season at all and hit any of the targets that were potentially set at the beginning of the season, he has to get more from what he has. And that requires figuring out a way to play better attacking football that includes our best attackers, because ESR and Saka are not going to get you enough goals um, in the season, and putting that much pressure on them is not right anyway. And the underlying metrics really don't lie. I mean, we are very average, in terms of everything that we're doing, and we're not much better than what we were last season, even though so much money has been spent. He's gotten his preseason. It's not without fans anymore. All the things that were meant to keep him from doing a good job last season, they're not really holding up anymore. So it really just kind of comes down to he hasn't improved, so the team hasn't improved, and it's really just that simple. And unless something drastically changes, we're gonna finish mid-table, and I mean, it just is what it is, like. Um, Yo-Yo says, "Next season is Winter World Cup. It's broken. Stop-start season." Yeah, I mean, let's see if he's even there, if he's even here by then. Rolf says, "I've noticed our fans stopped talking about Tottenham a month ago. We couldn't stop talking about them." I mean, you kinda talk about your rivals when you're doing good and they're doing bad, but I would venture to say that I think unless we get better, we will not be able to lay a glove on Spurs or United because I don't think they're going to lose very many games from now until the end of the season. I think they have enough within them to do really well into the end of the season. They have good managers and enough good players in the right positions to get them where they need to go, and That's a part of it as well, is that when you have game winners in your team, you know, as much as you probably don't wanna admit it, Ronaldo and Bruno make a huge difference in that Man United team. Rashford makes a huge difference. Kane, Son, whatever that guy's name is, Mora, they all make a difference because they're experienced players that can take the game by the scruff of the neck and make something happen with when the team's playing poorly. And right now, unless everything goes perfect for us, because our game winners are kind of on the outskirts of the system at the moment, everything kind of has to go perfect for us to get a result. And when we were a really bad team, but Aubameyang was overperforming his XG and was playing really, really well, we were pretty much just Man United. A pretty average team. Even Spurs, just average team. Not really well coached, but we had one player out there that could make something happen if nothing was going well for us. And we don't really have that. So the only way to combat that is to be really well coached. And we're not that. So we don't have players that can just change the game. And we're not well coached, and I have a hard time understanding why it's not obvious that we're just not well coached. If we took off the Arsenal kit and we just put any other kit on those players and watched them play, we would say the manager has no idea what he's doing. Ivy says the 10 games unbeaten was all for nothing. Oh my gosh, don't even remind me. So I guess the last thing we can kind of touch on is just the individual player performances as well. Like, I don't know what's going on with Thomas Party. I really don't. I do agree with Nashville Gunner that we go as Party goes. He's bad and we play really bad. I do agree with that. I think we have no connection from the defense to the attack because he was not showing for the ball. I mean, he was really involved in both of Everton's goals and like, I mean, not in a good way either. Like he was just bad, for both of those goals. And I saw Ben White several times going, "Can you make an angle? Can you make an angle?" And Thomas was like, "No, just pass it around." And he would get it and have tons of space in front of him. Like he's facing here and he receives the ball and he could turn and there was so much space and he would just decide to pass it sideways, sideways. The guy's confidence is completely gone. It's completely gone. And he's not convincing on the ball. He doesn't look confident in what he's doing. He doesn't trust himself. So I don't think his teammates trust him. And I saw at certain points Ben White and Odegaard and Tamiyasu were all kind of doing his job and just kind of crowding him out of that space because it was just like, yo, like we're really carrying you. And but this is where good management really comes in. Has Arteta ever had a player go this far out of form and bring him back to life? You know, that is something that he needs. I mean, it's up to Thomas Partey to obviously do his part, but this is where good management comes in as well. Maybe he needs to save Party from himself, let him sit out a game, talk to him, do something so that because this is the guy that if you don't get him ticking, your season is done, and he's gonna leave us in January. So it's gonna be interesting to see, but this might be also an opportunity for Arteta to use Sambi, who is a player that had a man of the match performance against Newcastle, created 8 big chances for us. And he's been sat for the last 2 games, so maybe bringing Sambi back in might help, but Thomas Party is really, really hurting us right now. And he needs to help this guy get back into form somehow. And this is where man management comes in. Again, Thomas has to do his own part, but yeah, and maybe AFCON will be good for him. Maybe he needs to get away from Arsenal and the pressure, but he also can't just throw himself into a pit of despair and not stand up. And this is where, being asking players to be leaders when they probably never had to be one before really just kind of like whew, goes right above their head because they're like, "Oh, you need me to perform to do well? You need me to show these young players what to do? What? I can barely get myself together." Because at Atletico, if Thomas Partey was shit, they would just replace him with one of the other midfielders that they had because he didn't play all the time. Alexander says, I mean, something is going on if Thomas Partey, Tierney, Nuno, and Pepe stay in bad form much longer. Yeah. There's something with the majority of the team being out of form that just makes me think it's the manager, but that's just me. But even Ben White, I saw, like, there's a lot of negativity around him as well, that he got bodied and he was getting bullied and all that kinda stuff, and, was he really worth the 50 million when just a couple of games ago, when the midfield was playing better, Ben White played better. As the midfield goes, this team goes, and so we're looking at that back four. Ben White is obviously the biggest target because he costs the most money. That's literally what it is. They can't say anything about Ramsdale because he's so good, but when it comes to Ben White, it's always about his price tag. Was he worth it? And I'm a little bit reluctant to go in on Ben, knowing that the midfield was nowhere to be found. Like, it literally was so bad against Everton, and all of the games where we spent a lot of time talking about the midfield, there was also bad performances in the defense. They need to be protected. Defense is a team thing. So with Ben, I know he's still kind of like probably adapting to the team a little bit, adapting to being in a new setup and all of that. But it's kind of like when you're just unprotected this entire time, what are you supposed to do? And so the next time I see the midfield do really, really well, and then Ben White drops a 3 out of 4, then I'll look at it more closely. But that midfield is not protecting that back line. And so it's going to be difficult. Um, let's see. Nashville says, I think White has been good most games this season. I think he's been fine since the Norwich game, but it's always more difficult for a player that came with such a hefty price tag. And then there's a lot of, but Saliba, but Saliba, but Saliba, but Saliba. The funny thing about Saliba is that he's been dropping some bad performances over the last couple of weeks because his whole team has been pretty poor the last couple of weeks. And I don't hear much about Saliba. It's only when he has a really good performance and we lose a game where people are talking about Saliba. If you watch him day in and day out play for Marseille, you cannot say that you believe 100% that that boy would be doing so much better. The argument is really more, should we have brought in Ben White or should we have just put in Saliba and bottom midfielder? Maybe, maybe that's more of the stronger argument. But the argument that I really push back on is that Saliba is better than Ben White when we've never seen Saliba play in the Premier League, and he's dropping like shitty performances in League One and nobody's saying anything about it. I still love Saliba, by the way, but I do watch him. Um, Tony says, Party is afraid of getting injured. He wants to play an AFCON. I wouldn't be surprised. I wouldn't be surprised if he's protecting himself for AFCON. I mean, his coach, the Ghanaian coach has talked shit about Arsenal in the past and said, oh my gosh, you know, um, oh my gosh, like, I can't believe Party went to Arsenal. He's doing this, he's doing this. I wouldn't be surprised if they were like, you need to protect yourself, buddy. Um, let's see. CJ says, Jess, we know you've like flat out refused to call out any mistake or something he could have done better. I feel like you think you're being negative, toxic if you criticize him. He's been good. No, I do call out mistakes. When he wasn't playing well, I said that he didn't play well. I just feel like it's hard for me to criticize the defense when I know that that midfield was just leaving them open and exposed. And so also, when I look at Ben White, I know he's not the best defender. He's there to get on the ball, help us progress. He was trying to do that, so it's always about what you expect from a player, what you know he's good at. And so I always knew that there was going to be games where he would be out muscled by strikers because he just wasn't that guy. But he's been really good up until the Liverpool game. He was fine against Newcastle, and the games that he did poorly, newsflash, the midfield was horrible. So it's just difficult for me to really go in on him. We all know that he made mistakes, but and I'm not afraid to say it. I just feel like we need the midfield to perform. I mean, the defense, we all like the defense, but they've given up 10 goals in the last 4 games, and we all think that this defense is a lot better than before. The last 4 games, the midfield has just been pants, so that's just me. Nashville says, "Absolutely buy a CM in January." We need, we do. We need a midfielder. We definitely do. So we need something, or the midfield just needs to perform a lot better, you know. So yeah. But see, Kevin, Ben White has been good against the rubbish teams, but our whole team has been good against the rubbish teams. So who's played well in the last 4 games besides Odegaard? That's what I'm saying. It's like we key in on Ben White because he has the biggest price tag, and there's a lot of conflict in the fan base about whether or not he's a good player. And so I'm cognizant of that. And the whole team has been bad against good teams and good against rubbish teams. And I think that that's more due to Arteta than anything. Ben White, we did not buy him to be Gabriel. We bought him to be good on the ball and to help us progress and all of that. So I'm not going to sit back and act like I'm surprised that he got bodied by Richarlison because he's never been like that big, strong defender's defender. So it's, it's kind of like being upset at somebody for not winning a race when you know that they're slow. Sorry. Uh, Arteta says the senior players need to lead and the young players need to follow. The truth is, our senior players, they're not real leaders. They're not real leaders, but also, again, we have a couple of senior players, and they're not really leaders, any of them. Aubameyang is the main person that we're looking at. Thomas Partey is in really bad form, but let's just look at Aubameyang. Aubameyang is a very attention-loving guy. He plays well when everybody is screaming his name and saying that he's the best thing since sliced bread. He's just that guy. He's very flashy, and that's his personality. You're asking somebody who's at the tail end of their career, wanted to leave, wants to play Champions League football, to continue to play for you, even though you don't play to his strengths. And you're basically asking him to finish out his Arsenal career not scoring goals and playing in build up and playing like a midfielder, even though those aren't your strengths, uh, for a team that is now a youth project. But when he signed his new deal, it wasn't. It was a team that was trying to get into Champions League. Oh, and he's not a natural leader, and he doesn't care about Arsenal Football Club. He has no affinity to it. So, and he's gotten his biggest contract he'll ever get in his life. That's asking a lot of Aubameyang. Arteta could get more buy-in from him and probably the other senior players as well, because they probably follow his lead if he played to Aubameyang's strengths. He's asking him to do a lot for somebody who is very all about themselves. The only way you're going to get a senior player to do all of that is if they have an affinity to the club and they care how they leave it. Like, think about the senior players that have given up some of their salary at Barcelona so that the club could stay afloat. Those boys care about the team probably because they came out of their academy. They really give a shit about it. They've been at Barcelona for their entire lives. Aubameyang doesn't care. So Aubameyang has somebody who he probably thinks he's had a better career than, telling him to sacrifice the rest of his Arsenal career for him, but he won't even play to his strengths. Like, that is a tough ask. Like, it really, really is. And so I really just think that, like, Arteta would get a little bit more from his senior players if he just played to their strengths and didn't say, do what I say, even though you're not going to score any more goals. Like, that's just not, like, it's just not. So that's just me. But yeah, but we know he's not going to change. So, Yo-Yo says White has been fine this season. Ivy says Basuma is a friend of Pepe, hence the reason I doubt we will get him, unless we pay him a lot. I don't see it either. Jean Rene says, I see what you're saying, Jess, but I disagree that Abba doesn't have an affinity to this club. Abba cut his salary as well. Come on, Jess, you're not being fair in this aspect. I mean, I don't think he cares enough about the club to sacrifice himself like that. I just feel like it's a lot to ask. So when I say an affinity to the club, I mean just completely be sacrifice his personal wants for Arsenal. So it's not really me shitting on Aubameyang. It's me saying that Arteta's asking too much of somebody that is not an academy dude. Like he's not Thierry Henry. Like when Thierry decided to stay at Arsenal Football Club when he could have went anywhere in the world in his prime, he stayed at Arsenal. Well, we started this new project to play in a team that was significantly like was nowhere near the Invincibles because he cared so much about Arsenal Football Club. I Aubameyang stayed because of the pandemic and because he couldn't get a move anywhere else. Like that's just so different. So it's not that I don't think Aubameyang. It's not that I'm shitting on Aubameyang. It's more just like that's a lot to ask. Like it just is. So it just is what it is. Kurumi says, "You think Aubameyang really doesn't care?" I think that it's a tough ask to ask somebody to basically go the rest of their Arsenal career knowing that they're not going to be played to their strengths, and this is their last big contract, and we're not in Champions League, we're not in Europa League. When you signed your new deal, it wasn't a youth project, and now it is. Just think about it from Aubameyang's perspective. He's always been the guy that it's been about him. He was like that at Dortmund. He was like that at Arsenal. I'm not talking out of my ass. I know Aubameyang at least well enough to know that if he wanted more, if he wanted, if he, if we played more to his strengths, I think we'd get a better Aubameyang. I think that's a lot of it. Um, yeah, so that's all I'm saying. But I think you guys think I'm being mean to Aubameyang. I'm not. I'm saying if Arteta knew Aubameyang well, he would just concede a little bit and play. He got the best out of Aubameyang when he played to his strengths in the FA Cup. That's all I'm saying. In the FA Cup, it was all about Aubameyang. He played out of his skin, you know, and you just got the most out of him if you just played that way. He was, this is my manager, all that kind of stuff when we won the FA Cup. And the very next season, a couple months later, you're not playing like that anymore. So it's just difficult. So that's all I'm saying. Um, so like am I just talking I was like, am I speaking a different language or do I see Aubameyang differently? That Aubameyang is a typical striker where it's about him. Like, you know what I mean? Like they want it to be about them. And right now it's not about him. He is setting up Saka and ESR for goals. Like that's all I'm saying. That's all I'm saying. All right, you guys, that's gonna be it. We've kind of just exhausted this a little bit much. It's not nothing negative towards Aubameyang. I just feel like Arteta needs to play to his strengths. But that's it. Make sure you guys like the video, subscribe to the channel. I was gonna do transfer stuff uh today, but because everybody was kind of like down and out about the game, didn't do it today, but it will start tomorrow and we'll start talking about transfers and all of that. So tune in for that. Make sure you guys are subscribing to the channel and all of that kind of stuff. If you guys just got here, you guys can rewind it and watch from the beginning. Yeah, and I'll see you guys in the next one.